Here. Doherty. Here. Moyle. Here. Grosso. Here. Keating.
Here.
Trace. Grant.
Here.
We have one.
Okay. First item on our agenda this evening is the presentation by Mr. Adams for our 2026 strategic plan. So, if you'd like to take the floor, Mr. Adams. I see you're a little bit late. I don't know where your partner is, but
She's in Florida.
good for her.
This one, I don't know what I do.
On two.
Okay, thank you. Stacy's with us tonight, but as we begin and we take a look in just a minute at the process, as I look at the board, in 2019, you look different. And there's obviously a number of board members who are newer since that time. But for those of you that don't know who, I'm Bill, W.H. Adams and Associates. We do strategic planning with school districts all over the country, but a lot of them in New Jersey, where I was superintendent for 36 years. And yes, in the same school district in Salem County. I don't know that, Troy, how close are you to 36? A long way from that. Well, these are different times, and they're much more challenging times than I ever faced when I was a superintendent. But in August of 2019, we interviewed with the board that was in place at that time, and we were selected to work with the district to develop a strategic plan and a strategic vision. And we actually were hired December 16th of 2019 and began the work in early January 2020. During that time, we reviewed a lot of data about the district. We looked at test scores. We looked at progress made with social and emotional learning. We looked at 5 years of budget, back look at budget. We looked at facilities. We looked at staffing and staffing patterns. We pulled that information together. We did a community survey and did a lot of interviews with a lot of focus groups, parent groups. In fact, we met in this school in the library with a group of parents. Unfortunately, the world turned in March of that year, and we went on hiatus, and the strategic plan stopped. So when we stopped, we took a break, and as the rest of the world did. And then when we reconvened, we had to go back and do a second survey and then compare that survey to the results of the first one. Again, a whole different world than we knew in March 2019. There's a 10-step process up on the screen, and I'm just going to take a minute to look at that 10-step process. What we're presenting tonight actually is a 34-page executive summary. The board will have, and eventually for a public publication, the executive summary, 11 supporting documents to that, including the work of the advisory committee, which we're going to introduce in just a minute. But if you look up here on the screen, the board and leadership team, we went through and got the input from stakeholders. From there, we collected the data that I just mentioned. We did the perceptions of strengths, challenges, opportunities, and threats. From there, we looked at the state of the district and then worked with an advisory committee that we're going to introduce, as I said, shortly. That advisory committee spent 4 intense meetings, and we did it we did it by Zoom, and when you're doing 2.5-hour meetings at a crack by Zoom, it takes some commitment. And in between those meetings, the advisory committee worked together to come up with a mission statement as to who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and how you do it, and a vision as to where you want to see the district go over the next 3, 5, and perhaps even 7 years, the vision. So with that, the advisory committee then identified 6 target areas, 5 of which actually have action plans, and that's going to be our focus tonight. So from there, we identified target areas, action plans were developed, action plans were reviewed, and that last blue box over there, we're here tonight in front of the community and the Board of Education to present the action plans. And in that last green step, because all the work that's been done, if it sits on the shelf, it means nothing, and we wasted a lot of time and effort. So it's important that the next step be that implementation. So with that, do we have a clicker here to, or are you controlling that, Ted? And Ted, fantastic job on this. Thank you. And Jen. But thank you for putting that together. This is the advisory committee. Any of the advisory committee members here? Stand up, please. All right. Now, this advisory committee really worked hard. And we had, and this is a group that worked together. You know, sometimes in this world, we can't agree to disagree. This group, we didn't always agree, but they worked together and they came out with a product, and that mission statement in particular. The action teams grew out of this group. Any members of the action teams here that weren't on the advisory committee? So you can see a reflection. I would like to just say for everybody else in the audience, can we give this group a round of applause? Thank you. This is the proposed mission statement. Troy, I don't know whether you or a member of your team, would you like to lead the group in reciting the...
This is what we did at each meeting, right? After we decided to our mission statement. So I'm going to ask everybody in the audience to join along, okay? So this is our proposed mission statement. In partnership with students, families, and the community, the mission of the Township of Franklin Public Schools is to foster the unique potential of each individual student by providing an inclusive, safe, supporting learning environment.
Just stay here a second. That tells you what you do, who you do it for, and how you do it. The vision, where do you want to take the organization?
Do the same thing? Okay. All right, if you could join me. Ted, we're going to click over to the vision. All right, so here's our proposed vision statement. Everybody together. To be a child-centered community that empowers students and equips them with the academic, social, and emotional foundation needed to become responsible citizens and lifelong learners.
Thank you. This was the first step, first movement. The group then identified 5 areas to get there. There's actually a 6th area that's going to be worked on next year. So curriculum and instruction, communications, finance and facilities, social and emotional learning, and talent acquisition and retention. The one that's not up there is a portrait of a township graduate in 6th grade. A lot of work was done on that, and it was an important piece that the team decided to take next year, and the district leadership team is going to work on developing that. So there's a portrait of a graduate what does that graduate need? What should that graduate look like to be successful in a regional middle school, high school, and beyond? So with that, what we're going to do is really take the time now to focus on the actual action plans to hear what the next steps will be. So I believe we're going to start with, is it the communications? Curriculum?
I'm not going to use that, though. I'm loud enough, President.
Okay.
only 50% of our student population had actually been with us since kindergarten. And that we are actually a very transient district with students coming in and out. So we wanted to be able to look at our data for students that have been here with us since kindergarten or have been here with us for 4 years or more, and then pulling out those students that are coming in later and coming out later. The reason that we never really discovered it before was because when you took a look at our attendance, the numbers, like the same amount of kids that were coming in were the same amount of kids that were leaving. So there was never like a significant number, gain or loss, any particular grade level over time. So it really was digging in to see how long have our students been with us, is what we're doing when they're here working. And for the ones that are not here and they're coming in later, how can we support them and their families? And also, how do we get them to stay in our school district? So that is one of the primary things that we will be looking at as a committee, is working with real time and link it. So we're able to pull that data apart to see how are things going for those kids that have been with us, and how is the academics and the progress for the students that have not been with us and they're coming new into the district. And how can we also take a look at how the onboarding process for new students when they come into the district. So really taking a look at what information are we getting from the school district that they're coming from, that the parents are giving us, and also we assess them once they're here for math and language arts, and can immediately give them any services that they need, whether it's a tier 2 or a tier 3 service for math or ELA, but also bringing in that social and emotional component as well, and trying to just streamline this process of new families coming into the district, and how can we support them and for their kids to be successful once they're here. So part of that second goal is to also build a cohesive articulation program between our 3 schools, and making sure that we make articulation an important piece as much as we possibly can. It's a little difficult sometimes when it's not like a full professional development day, for example, but this Friday we have a professional development day. It's our last one before the end of the school year. So this Friday is articulation across all the grade levels for all the contact areas for the teachers. So that is our big goal there. We also want to streamline the articulation that we have with ELK and Delcy. So just working with them more, getting more of a cohesive curriculum with ELK, and then also streamlining, we're working with them right now with the new social studies standards, and looking at resources, and looking at our curriculum, and which grade levels are teaching what. So we want to strengthen that relationship with them as well. Some of the barriers or challenges to these 2 goals really is just real time and link it, and getting them to work together. When we're talking about pulling data for how long students have been here, we really want to look at how many years and how many months have they been in our district, and being able to pull that data simultaneously rather than having to pull it from 2 different programs. Just looking at that enrollment process, looking at flowchart software to help us with that, analyzing the incoming data, really streamlining when a new student comes into the district, who is the point person that lets the school know, that lets the teachers know that this student needs to be tested, and actually getting a flow chart into place so nobody falls through the cracks. Collaboration, discussing our norms at our meetings, and really taking a look at the transition of the students that are coming in and out of the district, and really being able to look at it by every month, because we do, every month there are kids constantly transferring in and transferring out. So being able to pull a report that easily tells us by grade level and the demographics of those students that are coming in and out, so we can meet the needs of those families as well, and make adjustments that we need to academically for those students. All right, so we already have a district testing schedule in process. Every year we have our universal screeners and our diagnostic testing for academics. You'll hear from the Social and Emotional Learning Committee that they are looking at a universal screener for social and emotional learning, and that is mandated by the state of New Jersey that we will need to have one. And we will be monitoring the new student assessment for classroom placement of students and support needs for new students entering into the district. Now it's communication.
Thank you, Mrs. Golden. And with the Communications Action Plan Group, I would like to thank our co-chair that worked tirelessly with me, both with organizing our committee, but also putting together this presentation in the final stage, Jen Graff. With communications, it's really twofold. We're going to review all of our current communication methods and evaluate their effectiveness. And then secondly, we're going to determine some successful methods of communication and integrate new communication platforms that addresses the gaps that are found in a comprehensive needs assessment. So taking a look at goal number one, it's kind of step one, almost in a way that our committee was forming this. With step number one, we're going to review and evaluate the effectiveness of our current communication practices. This will primarily be done with a survey that will be used in order to assess for gaps, increase opportunities for input, and engage multiple stakeholders to foster positive messaging on behalf of all students. And if you heard there, I mentioned multiple stakeholder groups. This would include faculty, staff, parents, and also our general community. Within this practice, we are also going to be defining what we are currently using as our communication methods, both at the district and at each school. We will conduct some quantitative analysis or visits to our current communication methods. Really, we're going to look at our Google Analytics and other analytic opportunities to see how many hits we might have on different sites, to see how many visits to a school newsletter that we might have, and so forth. We'll also research the communication methods utilized by neighboring school districts to see what is effectively being used out there. And ultimately, we will evaluate the survey results to see the feedback of our entire school community. Step number two, or goal two as we have listed. Well, based off of all of that information, we're going to determine successful methods of communication and integrate these new communication platforms. Some secondary goals that we have listed here that we're aiming to achieve. First, to refine and enhance our district and school communication methods. And this would be based off of the multi-stakeholder surveys and the research of effective strategies implemented by neighboring schools, districts, and communities. Second, we're going to streamline communication methods at the school level. Some of this might include regular communication methods and how communication is relayed to faculty, staff, parents, and the external community. And third, we will be updating communication methods at the district level. Some of this might include regular communication methods to the entire school community, faculty, staff, and parents. Within Goal 2, we will be integrating additional communication strategies to make sure that we're reaching all stakeholders. This would include a proactive media communications program, hopefully to highlight the district's new mission and vision statements, along with the district's goals, challenges, and accomplishments. Hopefully we'll be able to leverage external communications, hopefully by bringing in new and existing community publications. We'll be analyzing and possibly adjusting our emergency communication methods. And ultimately, we'll be investigating different ways to distribute information to make sure that it's accessible to all families within our school community. As far as assessment, I had mentioned Google Analytics and really an analytics approach beyond just Google, but taking a look at how many hits are on our website, to how many views are on a school newsletter, any aspect of an analytical approach that we can have here within our communication methods, we will be garnering in order to see their success, hopefully the successful nature of communications within our district. Our committee has also talked about conducting a follow-up survey in a couple of years to see the effectiveness of whatever strategies we have implemented. And also general feedback, and that could be at any point during the course of this. whether it be from a parent advisory committee, the feedback that might be presented here at a Board of Education meeting, but feedback in general about how we are utilizing communication. As far as barriers, we do realize that we do have a community of non-English speaking families that have moved into our district, and we want to make sure that we provide a fair and equitable opportunity for those families to see all of our district communications, whether it be the translation of a site or the ability to translate a communication publication that might be out there from a school. We want to make sure that all those families can view this in the language that they speak. Something else that came up during the course of our meetings was the creation of a new district-level community relations and partnership representative. So that is hopefully something that will be considered by the Board of Education in the future. This position could really have a myriad of functions, not just as a person to kind of take a look at the communications in general for the district, but really to push out a lot of the positive activities that are occurring within each of our schools and also at the district level on a very frequent basis. And as far as implications, ultimately our hope is to streamline and enhance district and school communication methods, to increase positive visibility of our district and the schools, and to ensure that we have a fair and equitable experience for all families within our school district. Next presentation is going to be on the Finance and Facilities Subcommittee.
Okay, so we're Finance and Facilities, our action team. Actually, I chaired this or co-chaired this with Trish Birmingham. We took a little bit of a different approach. We didn't have action team members, we had action consultants. So the primary goal for this that came out of the strategic plan was to investigate the feasibility of expanding a pre-K program within the regards of facility and finance. So you're talking universal pre-K for all students in Franklin Township. You know, our first task, as all the other committees were saying, we tried to identify some of the barriers and challenges. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind is the cost, of course. Just taking a look at what the cost would be, taking a look at our facilities, the construction, the sustainability of those reoccurring costs. But also, you know, how detailed that grant application is, putting in for approval there, making sure that those grant funds will be continually available to sustain a full day pre-K program. Again, talking about the land and facility capacity and our capability, and then also possible participation rates, maybe surveying the community to see how many 3-year-olds, how many 4-year-olds would participate in the full day pre-K program. Some of the other identified barriers and challenges, of course, staffing. We know staffing is a challenge, and actually Mr. Coach will talk about that in just a little while. But just the availability of certified pre-K teachers, having that master teacher on site, and then some of the program requirements that are set forth by the state. We need to do some research. And then we realize this isn't going to happen overnight. This is going to be a lengthy endeavor. You know, if the board does choose to support a program like this, it's going to take time. It's going to take an awful lot of community support. So they're really the barriers and challenges. Our action steps, of course, just researching the preschool grant, taking a look at what the stacks and the deadlines are for the pre-K grant, reviewing the requirements of the pre-K program from a facility standpoint with our architects and our engineers, taking a look at class size, the requirements for the classrooms, going back to the staffing too, how many teachers we would need in pre-K to reserve teachers along with aides in the classroom. Doing a demographic study, taking a look at how many 3 or 4-year-olds we do have in the community that will participate in the program, and then certainly looking at the implication that may have on all the ancillary services, so our transportation, food service, nurses, child study team, secretarial, administrative. That'll put a tax on all of those as well. Of course, the budget impact, taking a look at what the grant would truly fund versus what would then need to come out of the local operating budget. Those recurring costs, of course, you worry about the grant funds not being there in the future to sustain the program. But also taking a look at the impact that this may have on on some of the community pre-K programs that are already up in place. Of course, taking a look at bond and tax rate increase. So all of those things will go along with it. Certainly, we know the educational impact will be a strong one, and that's probably the selling point for this. But we're going to take a look next year to try to complete steps 1 through 5, and then come to the board with a recommendation at that point. So that's facilities and finance.
I need some help with that stuff, so. Good evening, everybody. I'm Barbara Tampy, Special Ed Supervisor, and I was on the Social and Emotional Learning Action Team. My partner in crime, Morley, was actually really the leader with this. Those of you that work with me know that SEL is very important to her, and she was already part of the district-wide committee. So I was very fortunate to work with her on something that she is so very passionate about. We also had some action team members that are part of the committee currently, including Samantha Hirsch, who is a school counselor at Main Road, Michelle Sempielli, who is a school counselor at Jambier, Kristen Nixon, who is my school psychologist on the child study team. Then we had Melanie Garofalo, who is a teacher and a parent at Jambier, and Nicole Bonton, who is one of our instructional aides at Jambier. We had a lot of fun, but we did get a lot of work done. So our goals, for those of you that know and have been around here, SEL has been a push for us for the last few years. So really what we would like to try to do is enhance and emphasize students and staff emotional well-being. So we've already got a good start with what we're doing, but we want to make that a little bit stronger. And that would include identifying and addressing some behavioral challenges in schools. We have had, because of look at restructuring the SEL team to include all stakeholders. Right now, we have some teachers on there, we have instructional aides, but we feel like we need to expand that and really get a larger group of people. There's so many people in this district that have so much to contribute to SEL, so we do want to take a look at that. And then we'd like to create our own vision that is based on the district's vision, but once we have our team together, we want to look at a specific SEL vision. We also feel it's important to assign specific roles to the team members. It's very difficult for them right now. They have a lot of things going on, but it's kind of like there's no structure. So thinking of, and you'll see down here that we want to create a website. So having someone that's on the team who's going to be specifically responsible for keeping that website up to date and adding resources to it. We also do a lot of monthly activities. We have a calendar of events, and we also think it would be appropriate to have someone that's just in charge of that. So really working smarter and just trying to hone in on specific things that we feel people, like I would never be in charge of the website, but we have a lot of really great, I can't do a clicker with one, but we have a lot of great people that know so many things about technology, so we want to go upon our people's strengths and go from there. We'd like to also ensure consistency through monthly meetings or bi-monthly meetings. It is very challenging, and you'll see I list this as a barrier later on, but to get everybody together, we have 3 schools, 3 different times, so that is something that we really want to try and focus on. And then we want to identify additional opportunities for PD. We've been doing that currently, and you'll see down the line when we do have our screener selected and we find out really honing in on where our students lie and the needs that they have, we'll add to the professional development that we're going to offer. And then continue to support, to plan and support school events. I know you guys all heard about the great PD Day that Jamie and the SEL team put on, and we are doing something again this Friday. So part of it will be vertical articulation, as Jamie spoke of, but we're also going to continue with some wellness activities because the staff really enjoy that. So for years 2 and 3, we're going to research the screener that we talked about. There are a number of screeners out there available. We've already started to take a look at them, but we are going to research the screening tool and then eventually select the tool that we want to use. Based on that screener tool, we're also going to select a curriculum, as Jamie explained, we need to focus on that, move forward with that, but it has to be consistent with the screening tool. So once we get the tool, then we'll pick the curriculum one right now at Ritter, and I am a mentor and I absolutely love it. It's just basically an opportunity for the staff to be matched up with a student that has been recommended by another staff member that just might need a little bit of extra time to spend with somebody for whatever reason it is. But I think, I always thought when the child would be getting more out of it, but I think I get more out of it than the kid actually does, but I do enjoy it. And I think that we could really expand upon that. So we'd like to do that. And then basically have more consistency with a district-wide social emotional program. So some barriers, as I mentioned before, common planning time is difficult, and I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but we're going to try. There are some budget constraints. We are fortunate, and Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, for the next few years, and previously the SEL activities have been funded through grants. So we're looking good for the next few years with the things that we're doing, but eventually, as Mr. Wong talked about with the preschool grants are going to run out. So how do we want to sustain what we're going to be planning to do? And unfortunately, Mr. Kovic was talking about a little bit, we have had a large staff turnover. The challenge with that is that if you are teaching the teachers about a new curriculum and providing PD on that new curriculum, and then that teacher leaves, it takes more time to train the next person. So that is a concern that we have. As far as changing culture and climate, again, the last few years, things that are going on outside of our control absolutely affects how we feel the climate of the classroom, the climate in the schools. So who knows what's going to happen for the next few years. And that's pretty much what we feel our barriers and challenges are. As far as accountability and assessments, we do have a lot of data right now that we can look at as far as just looking at the screener and the curriculum and how effective that is. So we can always look at the discipline data that we have. The hope is that the more SEL activities that we can do, the discipline and the behavioral supports that we can provide, we'll see that the discipline incidence will decrease. We also have crisis data that we can look at, and that's more from the mental health standpoint. So we do obviously with children with threats, we have to take data on that and that is kept, so we can look at that. We will also look at the INRS committee, which is the Intervention and Referral Services committee. Right now, because of our tiered systems of support that Jamie and the curriculum department have put in place, a lot of our INRS doesn't have to do with academics because we have another route we can take. But we do have children that still need support from a behavioral standpoint, so they can go through the INRS. We're also planning on using staff and student surveys and screeners because it is important for us to know how others feel about what we're doing. And then we also can take a look at our CPI data. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but we do have crisis prevention and intervention training in our district, which is primarily 80% of that is how we can de-escalate if a student is in a crisis situation, but there is a physical aspect to it. So a lot of our staff is trained in how to safely restrain students if need be. Obviously, whenever that occurs, there's a lot of paperwork that goes with that, just documenting the situation. So we can also take a look at that to see how.
Thank you, Mrs. Dempsey. I will do my best to be quicker as well. Okay, the bottom right. Thank you. So, talent acquisition and retention. So with that, the first thing that I would like to do is thank the members of the team, certainly my co-chair, Mr. Walton, also the committee members, Ms. Lisa Bakota, Ms. Patty Allen, who are the officers of the Township Support Staff Association, and also Ms. Sue Buriak, the leadership of our TFEA, and Dr. Stacy Lefwich, who is a professor at Rowan University and also is the lead on the Educator Preparation Advisory Council. Very directly, that's a council at Rowan University that meets with educators from the region, of which I'm a member on that committee, and also with Rowan professors and even some of their upper level students who are in the education department. So with that, talent acquisition and retention, our primary goal of identifying and implementing initiatives to creatively acquire and maintain diverse talent. And the two key words there, acquire and then maintain. And certainly always shooting for diverse talent that will best meet the needs of our population of students. We know that nationwide there is a crisis. There's a crisis in education in terms of the number of individuals who are going into the education field is much less than the number of educators who are leaving the field. So with that, our district certainly has felt the impact. There has been considerable turnover within the last 3 years, specifically within our township schools. So this, needless to say, when we were sitting and we were working with Bill Adams and discussing what were going to be some of the key points that we wanted to focus on with this 5-year plan, absolutely acquiring and then maintaining that diverse staff. Barriers and challenges, really it's about looking at data, looking at the hard numbers, seeing what they really tell us, taking a look at perceptions, and then also taking a look at what we call emotional factors. And you can see by going through the bullet list, certainly, data, looking at the salary guide. Where are we in terms of local and regional school districts? And then down to some additional data, some things we're currently doing. What do we do in terms of marketing? What do we do in terms of advertising and recruiting? But then also strengthening our ties with schools that have, local schools that have education programs. And making sure that our expectations are aligning to their teacher preparation programs. And vice versa. Strengthening that relationship so that we're confident that the students who are graduating their programs are absolutely ready for employment, well, regionally and selfishly within our school district. All right, now, of course, taking into account the atmosphere of education, locally, regionally, nationwide, what are the pressures on educators that currently exist today that maybe did not exist as recently as a year ago? And certainly, how has it changed within the last 5 years and 10 years? All right, and then the perception of education as a profession, and that really filters out into the community, all right, to our stakeholders who run the local businesses, to the parents and the guardians of our children who come into our school district and getting their perception of who we are. And if there's certainly a disconnect, addressing that disconnect. And if there are areas that we need to address, absolutely addressing them. When we look at the breakdown of the action steps more specifically, resignation data points, taking a 5-year look back at resignations. And not on opinion of why people left us, but what were the real reasons? And then looking for the trends. And at that point, using that information to guide us in terms of an improved avenue so that our talented educators will be more likely to stay with us. We know in terms of student performance, student learning as a whole, the number one factor is contact with a highly effective teacher. If our highly effective teachers are leaving us, we have a problem. And we need to look at the trend data that tells us why, and we need to address it because it's directly affecting the learning of our children in this district. When we also take a look at salary guide comparison, local, regional, state, not just in terms of the nuts and bolts of dollars and cents, but also in terms of structure. And that's a piece, to do the overall look at, see what can be done, and so forth. But definitely getting a read on what's being done within the region, and is that a factor as to why some educators have left us for other school districts. Staff diversity analysis. All right, as we sit here, our most recent NJDOE report card of 1920 stated that we have 21% is our minority population of students in our district. And we know that our staff is not 21% in terms of minority representation. That's something we need to be aware of. We need to take a look at. And always we want to get the outstanding professional who is the most qualified to be a teacher within our district, but making sure that we're also considering meeting the multifaceted needs of all of our student population. And as we've already heard tonight, social, emotional, communication, and so forth, making sure that, yes, we have outstanding educators to teach math and to teach ELA, and then also outstanding educators who are prepared to meet the social, emotional needs of our children. Staff recruitment efforts. Well, what are we doing? And is it working? Are we truly getting the best candidates that we possibly can? Are there some other avenues that we need to look at? And there, as I mentioned, the connections with local universities. Sure, Rowan, we do have that connection, but also looking at some other universities and tying back onto the diversity piece. You know, creating a strong relationship with Lincoln University, Cheney University, and Delaware State University. Looking at their offices for career advancement, the job fairs that they have, and making sure that the graduates there know about us and the great things that we're doing here and why it's a great place to work here. Additional action steps. Employment application review. They're working with the Gloucester County Superintendent's Roundtable, working with the Gloucester County Principals and Supervisors Association, working with the NJEA and local regional sub-education leadership groups to see what's being done in other districts in terms of applications. You know, is it possible that one of the reasons why certain areas we don't seem to get a whole lot of applicants is actually because of our application process? You know, again, as I alluded to early in this presentation, some of these pieces are hard questions to ask, and really directly ask them, look at them through the lens of true improvement. So taking a look at what our process is, seeing what's done regionally, identifying trend data, and seeing if there needs to be improvement there. Exit interviews, having a formal process for exit interview. And again, in conjunction with the Gloucester County Superintendent's Roundtable, the Gloucester County Principal and Supervisors Association, as well as the NJEA. All right, getting everybody on the same page, again, to look at trend data of why would people want to leave our school district. I think that I speak for all of the administrators over at the table, as well as Mr. Walton. We do take it very personally when people leave us. We take it very personally. So with that, getting answers and then moving forward so that we can keep the outstanding educators with us. And having that formal exit interview process should give us some good data moving forward. Promotion and marketing of the district and working with the community to do so. Here, involving community stakeholders, creating school business relationships, right? Identifying, of course, as I said, the offices of career advancement of local universities, looking at our brochure that we have and tweaking that to see does it truly represent all of the positives that are occurring within our school district. Working with local real estate offices so that as people are looking to move into the community, do they have the most up-to-date, accurate information that really communicates the outstanding school district that we are. And then, of course, school community business relationships so that the community as a whole identifies what we are doing and we form a deeper relationship in terms of working with the community back and forth. So truly, where they're a resource for us and we're a resource for them. Now, we know Franklin Township Day, certainly we're outside over on the side field promoting our school district. All right, certainly we've seen the teachers there, we've seen the support staff, the administrators. All right, but then also, what are some other things that can occur to get our name out there so that we draw in candidates that can best serve our children? Assessment and accountability. Number one, it's a continuous review. It's looking, again, consistently at the data. It's looking at the perceptions. It's looking at the emotional factors. And embedded within those action steps are community surveys to get information periodically on what those perceptions are. And certainly if we don't like the answers, figuring out, well, why is that perception and what can we do about it? All right, also, keeping in mind as we go through in terms of assessment and accountability, really what the eyes on the prize is. We want to have a diverse, outstanding staff that we recruit in and then we maintain. And we keep people here that we believe can best serve our students and as a result can continue to improve our community. Okay, that's my program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, each of the advisory committee members, and certainly the chairs and co-chairs that put this together. I think one of the things you'll notice about each of the action plans, there's a goal, there's a timeline, there's a person responsible, there's barriers noted, and we know resources are needed. And one of the cautions we mentioned to the action teams, given where we are in this year, given where the budget is, the budget set for 22-23, there's a time process as you implement some of these. And so there are barriers to moving forward. But what are the next steps? There's only 3 more slides. So what are the next steps as we look at recommendations? Well, we recommend that the board adopt the mission and vision statement as proposed and put together by the advisory committee, your advisory committee. We recommend adoption of the first 2-year plans. And those plans are biannual plans, but with a caveat that every quarter those plans be reviewed and modified as needed. Some of the plans will come to fruition in a shorter period of time. Other action items are going to take a longer period of time, depending on available resources. So it's important to look at the metrics. It's important to have metrics. And so we recommend adopting of those action plans with the understanding that there has to be flexibility. There are changing issues that come up all the time. There are sometimes we see resources like ESSER that are here now but are going to disappear in the future. So there are things to look at. So at the end of the first year, we recommend a look back. Where are we? Can we move to some of the other goals that were not put in because of time and resources? Certainly next year, as Troy takes on with the leadership team, the Portrait of a Graduate, which will be the 6th action plan. That'll be developed next year. There's a lot of good information in the report as to what stakeholders wanted to see, what was thought was needed for students to be successful when they go to the middle school and beyond. Certainly the communications piece that was talked about. There's already some steps being taken to implement that. Very, very important to the future. One of the things not justified or recommended, and as consultants we try not in the recommendations to interject our thoughts, but one of the things we looked at is the possibility of looking at a liaison for critical communications and community relations. And some form of that might be in the form of an identified person with a stipend or a person to do that. But we think that's something as you look forward and as you look at the total plan, you may want to consider. The 5 action plans are all interconnected. None of them are independent of their own. So
this is a team effort. They all have to be interconnected and work together. And when you get that sixth plan, that'll be part of it as well as far as the portrait of the graduate. The portrait of the graduate could also serve to drive future curricular changes as you look at curriculum. When we worked with Washington Township on their portrait of the graduate from high school senior, they actually went back. They took 2 years and went back and looked at the exit, achievement skills, social and emotional expectations for students leaving preschool, kindergarten, first grade, to get to that point. That may be something, as you look at the student engagement, that you want to look at as part of that. We recommend that at each board meeting in the future, if you really believe in a strategic plan, take one goal, one action item, take 5 minutes, just talk about it, see where you are, look at the strategy. Otherwise, you forget about it. Sometimes then the resources don't want to move forward. Certainly we think that as you make future decisions, look at your strategic plan, especially for budgetary and resource allocation decisions. They're essentially what's up there in the 9 recommendations. Ted, I don't know whether there's some additional considerations. I'm not going to go over each of them. These are simply recommendations that Stacy and I looked at. They're in the report that the board has, and they're in the document. But we really believe that you've taken to address that first one up there. The deficits that many of our children have had when they come back, not only the learning loss, but the social and emotional, the interaction, and some of the things that we've done this year to continue those and to really push on that plan that we have for social and emotional learning. I want to just drop down to the last one, item 10. I think it's on the next slide, Ted. Before as you look at that last one, you've got some great things in place for student safety and security, and we recommend a continued review of that. It's not in the actual plans themselves, but to not forget the security every day and how important that is. The special education programs, as we look at, especially, and I'll drop back for just a second, experiential and project-based learning that your curriculum committee is looking at. Students that are the academically talented students are doing very well in the district. Students and parents come to Franklin Township for your special education programs. You've got some great programs. Sometimes that group that gets lost in the middle, and that experiential learning in particular is an opportunity to bring that group into the fold and provide them with activities. So we mentioned that as you look at both your gifted and talented and your special education programs. Always look for leadership development. We heard from Henry about the talent acquisition and how important that is in talent retention and onboarding of talent and keeping talent. It's also, as you look at your leadership team and development of that leadership team for the future and succession planning, important. And certainly the continuing efforts to share services, and you're doing a lot of that now to get the most out of your resources. And then the big elephant in the room is always, we heard a lot before the pandemic about consolidations and those kinds of things, and a lot of pressure from the state. And all our recommendation is be prepared. Be prepared. Know the pros and cons. Look at that, because that's something that's going to come up over and over again in the next 5 years. And there are pros and cons, so be aware of them. There are recommendations and areas for consideration, and at this point, we'll turn it back over unless there are questions, and certainly I'll respond to any, and I'm sure the action team chairs will respond to any questions if there are questions.
Are there any more questions? I just have a question. Moving forward, are the chairpersons of the committees going to essentially stay with their committees? Start doing work? Well, yeah, as far as the reporting to the board and so on and so forth.
Yeah, we'll put this in some introduction. Change the order.
The other thing, although you mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation, I just want to again acknowledge everyone that participated in the plan and thank them for their contribution. Obviously, without their assistance, we wouldn't have the plan. It has been about a couple of years and probably the longest strategic plan we've ever done. Very well. We've worked on this for years.
It's the longest in duration, yes.
Yeah. Thank you again. It's great work for Patricia to keep sending, letters out to all the businesses, obviously, once they're here. We have not been affected directly, but it was a tenant to even send them a letter of thanks and continue to let those people get involved with the action plan. Mr. Adams, it's a pleasure working with you. I'm sure we're going to see you again in the future. Hopefully, we'll see large days as well.
We'll do. And we're in the area, I have grandkids in the area.
Okay. So we may be calling you back for help. I said we may be calling you back for help.
We're happy to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, getting back to our agenda.
agenda that we pretty much just saw tonight. I am a little uncomfortable with voting on them tonight. The fact that there's a lot of information that's not sitting on the end or questioning anything that I saw today, but we have 35 slide PowerPoints about this strategic plan that we're being asked to vote on tonight, and I would make a motion to table that for our next meeting.
Also, I just wanted to, while you were speaking, remind me, Mr. Adams has mentioned, since it was a long process, that we've had some turnover on the board. So I also just want to acknowledge some of our previous board members who were here when we initiated that. So we have Mrs. Maxwell and Mrs. Collins. Definitely that and miss anyone for acknowledging board members for their role they played in setting the whole convention. With that, there's no other comments. We'll get back to my thing here. And we're going to move on.
Motion made and seconded.
Just want to discuss that now, or want to wait till the actual vote? So moving on, we have our first public comment portion this evening for agenda items only. So I would make a motion to open to the public. Have a second. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on any items this evening or on our agenda? Seeing no one, I make a motion we close the first public portion. Have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Moving on, school president report. I don't have anything specific to report. I did, however, have the opportunity to attend a lineman Board of Education meeting. I had read a newspaper article regarding some issues that they were having in their district, and it kind of prompted my interest. So I went and attended one of their meetings, and it would be interesting. It was an interesting meeting to attend to see how they handle some of their issues and just their agenda and the course of their meeting, some of the things that they do similar to us and some of the things that they do differently. So I just want to encourage any of our board members here, if you have an opportunity, I know it's busy. It's interesting to, attend other districts, Board of Ed meetings. I'm not saying you should go to line up, but if you have an opportunity somewhere else, local to the area, and just observe it. It was time well spent in my opinion. If you have the opportunity to something that's move on. Leah, do you have anything from MJ?
The New Jersey State Board of Education spring season is April 26th and 27th. It's going to be virtual. The new 2, 3, and 4 was today. I believe these members have a chance to do that, and we mentioned it in the work session as well. And that's about it.
Did you hear that, Mark?
I did not. I only heard the last sentence or two.
Sure. She was just mentioning NJFBA has a governance 1 class coming up virtual for all the new board members to complete. I don't remember that date. On May 9th.
May 9th.
Yeah. Is that, we need to register?
She already did.
Okay, so,
No, everybody should be registered for the online self-paced course. I didn't register anybody else for anything unless you specifically asked me.
but in the future, if there's any classes that you want to take, a lot of them require pre-registration by the board secretary, so you can just reach out to her directly.
Thank you.
Moving on, we have our minutes from the February 23rd board meeting, because everyone had an opportunity to do them. If so, I have a motion to approve the minutes listed. Have a second? All in favor? Any abstentions? All right. Now, not listed on our agenda this evening is executive session, but we did have a last-minute legal issue that our board solicitor would like to review with us prior to moving forward with our regular agenda this evening. So with that, I make a motion on executive for purposes of legal, probably won't be more than 5 minutes, 10 minutes. All take it all the way to so more than 10 minutes, so we'll be back pretty short. So I have a second on that motion.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed, abstentions? All right, we're right. Come out of executive session. Do I have a second? All in favor? Opposed, abstentions? Okay. The next item listed on our agenda is for the strategic plan approval. There's a motion on the table to table that approval, assuming till the April meeting. Would that be correct, Michelle?
Yeah, Lisa.
Okay. All right, there's a second. Just for context on that, it's not, just to give additional time for some of the board members to review the presentation. Apparently there was an issue with the attachment to the agenda. Is that correct? You were unable to retrieve it? All right. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else was able to review the this evening's presentation with your agenda on Friday. But in any event, we had some board members that were unable to retrieve it and weren't able to review it, which is the purpose for the motion to table. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just want to make that clear for everybody that participated. It's not because there's any particular issue. But, you want to call the roll on that, Trish? That's a motion to table.
Ellis? Yes. Caselli?
Yes.
Cunningham?
Yes.
Dougherty?
Yes.
Doyle?
Yes.
Grosso?
Yes.
Key? Yes. Frank?
Yes.
Motion carried.
So that item will be on our April agenda for approval. Human resources, any additions or changes?
You want to give a shout out to Captain Warner
Oh yeah,
Retirement.
retirements are under
for G4.
G4. Just want to acknowledge one of our longtime staff members, Mrs. Kathleen Niewarner, is submitting her retirement after 28 years of service with the Board of Education. So just obviously want to acknowledge her years of service. So any other revisions or nothing in human resources? Was there any questions from board members? If not, I make a motion to approve human resources items G1 through G13 as recommended by the superintendent. Do I have a second? Any other comments? If not, if you call the roll, please, Trish.
Caselli?
Yes.
Cunningham?
Yes.
Dougherty?
Yes.
Doyle?
Yes.
Regoso?
Yes.
Keen?
Yes.
Fellas?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. Education items.
It's all the same.
No revisions since our work session, so unless there's any questions. Make a motion to approve education items H1 through H5 as recommended by the superintendent. Do I have a second? Any other comments? Trish, call the roll, please.
Bellis? Caselli?
Yes.
Cunningham?
Yes.
Doherty?
Yes.
Doyle?
Yes.
Fregoso?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. General administration,
It's all the same.
no changes since our work session, so unless there's any comments, none. Make a motion to approve general administration items I-1 through I-6 as recommended by the superintendent. Do I have a second? All right, any comments, questions? Trish, if you call the roll, please.
King?
Yes.
Bellis?
Yes.
Caselli?
Yes.
Cunningham?
Yes.
Doherty?
Yes.
Doyle? Fregoso?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on to operations. Are there any revisions aside from the tentative budget?
No.
Okay. Regarding the tentative budget, did you want to review that, Trish, or?
I received no questions. I'm not sure what else to review in terms of that. The tentative budget is there listed with the general fund, the tax levy amount.
Sure. At the work session, I thought there was a general consensus that we wanted to see what the budget would look like with the removal of 2 of the 4 school buses. Was that revision?
Unfortunately, I didn't get that consensus, but if that's something we could talk about here, I'm fine with that.
Sure. I mean, I'm not really sure how you would make that change this quickly, but I mean, what?
Well, if you're looking to remove 2 school buses from the budget, the 4 school buses was about $500,000.
Right.
So we would just divide that and just change the tax levy and the general fund amount accordingly.
Sure. Is there any other questions from board members about that?
Well, who wanted to remove the buses, and I don't want to remove the buses, and you said 2%, that's not my business.
Okay.
If you ask, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I left that meeting. That was my impression that we wanted to look at the budget with the removal of 2 school buses. There was a conversation surrounding that, if I recall.
Yeah, I recall, but I don't know if we're underrated it, I don't know.
Sure. I mean, is there any other board members want to weigh in on that?
Well, just kind of piggybacking on something you said about other board meetings. For the other boards that I watch, they are usually presented one or more than one budget. They're presented to the budget with 2%, they're presented to the budget with 1.5%, they're presented to the budget with 1. And I'm not sure if that was just the status quo that's always been in Franklin, but we don't get to see what the other, what it might be if it was only 1% or if it was only 1.5, what would it have been?
That question wasn't posed at the last.
No, I know, I'm not saying that it wasn't those, but what I'm saying is, it's either all or nothing when we're presented a budget. It's what we're presented one way and that's it, so I don't know if going forward, maybe that's something we request as a board, where there's more than one presentation in terms of whatever the rate hike would be. I mean, we are where we're at right now. You know, there was discussion at our work session in regards to what could be cut, and buses were definitely mentioned. But we have what we saw when I said.
What is the timeline for the budget to be to the county by?
This year it's due March 28th, next Monday.
Next one,
Yes.
This is the tentative budget.
I think we had a lengthy discussion about the reduction of the number of buses that we were going to buy last week. I don't know that, I don't remember that we took a vote on it, but there was, I thought, a lot of agreement that we would like to see that number of buses was reduced, just in this possibility of reducing, the tax levy and total expenditures.
Right, but when we're coming up with the total tax levy and an amount of those buses, I don't know, I know what those buses cost, but in terms of tax levy, what's acceptable? Is it 3.26, is it 2.86? So that is more of a discussion.
So we're just looking at trying to save money.
Understood.
Well, trying to think what the best way to move forward here is. Would you like a vote on the tentative budget with a modification, or would you like?
I mean, I can give you, you have in the executive summary the tax rate comparison, and total tax rate that was in that comparison was the highest rate. So that is as the budget is presented. Anything less than that would obviously be a lesser increase to the taxes.
Right.
I can give you different scenarios. I have a 4%, I have a 3.25, I have a 3%. But again, everything is less than. The attached executive summary is there for brief and easy reference within the item number 18.
All right, well, let me do this real quick. I'll make a motion to approve operation items 1 through 17 as recommended by the superintendent. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Are there any questions on those items? If not, can you call a roll on those items, please, Trey?
Doyle?
Yes.
Grosso?
Wait, just to be clear, that's not the budget?
Nah, yeah, it's not the budget.
Yeah, just taking the budget out.
Yes, but I have to change the bill to J1, the shared service items.
Noted. Keen?
Yes.
Fellas? Caselli?
Yes.
Cunningham?
Yes.
Doherty?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Now regarding the budget, is there anyone else that would like to weigh in on the bus situation? So,
I have a question about the bus. The buses get replaced yearly, they're on schedule.
Correct.
So if we don't do 2 this year, what happens next year? You already have 1 or 2 scheduled.
Yes. It
So
depends
now we're
on,
doubling what's.
it depends on if there's money left in this year's budget to be able to purchase them advancing, but we don't know that yet.
Right.
So at that point, then yes, the replacement schedule will be pushed back 2 to 3 buses. Some years we purchase 4, some years we purchase 3. This year we do need an additional special education bus. So that's a total of 5 buses.
So I'm all about kicking the can when you can, but you can't pile up the cans. So, and you have the ability because of the COVID situation where there was like an extension that they were allowing.
Correct.
Right. So what happens when we allow it to go up to 4 buses?
Yeah, the extension's gone.
Right. And then we don't have a choice, we have to purchase more. I just want to make sure that that was the philosophy. This is a one-time thing. Next year, we're going to be in the same boat. We're still going to need buses. But now we're going to need this year's 2 buses plus what we get for supposed to be.
yeah, I don't necessarily know that, and maybe Trish could answer it further, that not purchasing 4 is going to put us into some sort of detrimental situation. I think 4 is what's ideal.
And purchasing 1 additional, correct?
It'd be replacing 5. So we do have another bus that does have to come off the schedule as well.
Okay, thank you.
But I think, to my point, we're not compounding anything by foregoing for a year, because you stated yourself that you may not even be able to get the bus. So that money may not get utilized anyway.
Right, but on the off chance that we can.
It may roll
would be
over,
better
right,
to
yeah.
have it sooner than later,
Sure.
given the ages of the buses that need to come off the schedule.
Well, given the discussion that we had, I didn't think there was anything outside of the buses that was even on the table to reduce
Yes, and I just
our
want to
tax
be
levy.
clear that, no, I understand that the buses were where we landed on to decrease, but to what amount? So that there's a tax levy increase that's comfortable.
Yeah,
I guess I'm
and
just
again,
asking
you know,
for-
like I
for a
said,
number and
I thought
approval.
that was thoroughly discussed on Wednesday evening, but if it wasn't, then I apologize. But if there's no other comments on the buses, I'd make a motion to approve the tentative budget with the reduction of 2 buses, the funds going to a decrease in the tax levy. Do I have a second on that?
Hold on, just before, I don't want to put you in more of a position, but let's
Sure.
just talk about a number. Because I don't want to send this levy, this budget to the county, and then when you get it presented in April, that
Well, sure. Well, you have a number for the buses, right?
Yes.
Which is how much?
Times two, I'm sorry, that would be a total of $250,250.
Right.
Decrease in the tax levy. That is presented.
Right. Which would be equivalent to about a 3% raise in lieu of a 5% raise, correct?
Roughly, yes.
Right.
2% is represented by $225,000,
Okay.
226, so, yeah,
So it would actually be a little less than 3% then.
yes.
Any questions about that?
Is anyone concerned about the safety of our kids on buses that potentially shoot off the road?
I asked that last time, they said it's not like the wheels are falling off the bus.
I'm not a mechanic, but I'm not willing to have it on my shoulder.
I mean, no, I don't have a concern that we're going to keep the buses on the roads that are legally allowed to stay on the roads. I mean, we're not keeping buses on the road that aren't permitted to be on the road.
You have to get permission for that extension, so it's not like,
Well, if they permit it, then yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, the way the bus schedule works, correct me if I'm wrong, Trish, is there an either-or situation of the age of the bus and the condition or miles of the bus?
Typically, the age of the bus that is the cause, if it makes that many years.
Right.
Some of the buses are 15 years, some of the buses are 20 years. Not all buses make that long.
So if we have a bus that's 20 years old with 100,000 miles on it, and we get a waiver on it, there could be another bus that has 500,000 miles on it that's 18 years old, which is arguably in worse condition than the 20-year-old bus, right? Right. So no, I'm not really concerned that they would allow an unsafe bus to be on the road. Yeah. Is there any other questions? Can you call the roll on that motion?
you can state your motion again.
Sure. I make a motion for the tentative budget presented with the modification of the removal of 2 buses with those dollars going to a reduction in the tax levy.
So instead of increasing the taxes 5% this year, we would only be increasing 3%. Is that correct?
A little less than 3%,
Thank you.
which is 3% more than I'd like to see them increase, but we're in a tough situation this year with our state aid being cut by almost $800,000. So, any other questions?
Trish, what are you concerned at all about this for next year, and financially what this puts us in, if we have to get additional buses?
At this point, I can't answer that unfortunately, based on still trying to figure out the funds left over for this year, if there will be funds to be left over. Again, just making sure that we put ourselves in the best spot for next year's budget in comparing to that state aid cost.
I think my thoughts here on this is we lost a lot of aid due to the decrease in enrollment. We're expecting potentially to come back, but if it doesn't come back, then we could look into potentially modifying the budget further surrounding that scenario as opposed to, but if it does come back, then we need a more comfortable position.
I think we're in the position we're in now because of the state aid as well as, of course, everyone loves 0% tax increase. We're doing it 2 years in a row, I think really hurt us. I just don't want to be in this position again.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of things you can cut out of the budget. This was what I thought was agreeable to cut. I mean, we agreed that we didn't want to cut staff. We agreed that we didn't want to cut expenses in other areas with the hopes that the enrollment will change moving forward and the state aid will change. I mean, but that discussion is something that will have to take place our next budget season if we don't get any kind of.
For the information of those that may not already be aware, we lost $800,000 in state aid. That's why we're having this discussion in such detail about what we're spending money on. $800,000 less than what we had expected.
All right. Any other questions? If not, can we call a roll?
Who seconded that? Your
I'll second it.
Leah.
Leah actually seconded it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Doyle?
No.
Fregoso?
No.
Keen?
Yes.
Bellis? Sally?
Yes.
Cunningham?
No.
Doherty?
Yes.
Brand?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on, we have nothing listed under old business. We have two items under new business. The feasibility grant and study interest letter is just something that has been requested by Delsey Regional. They're, I guess, applying for grant funding in order to do a feasibility study for the consolidation of the Delsey, Elk, and Franklin districts with the possibility of participation from Newfield as well. There's no obligation on the part of Franklin financially or otherwise for participation in the grant. So I think we had discussed this previously, but just to confirm that there's no board member that has any questions or concerns regarding participation in that feasibility study. If there is none, then the superintendent will reply to Delsey that we're certainly interested in participating. So, was there any board member questions or comments on that? So,
Just to clarify, that is only a letter of interest for Delsey to submit an application. It doesn't bind us to anything.
so there's no motion on that. It's just an item listed. So the administration will move forward with that. The other item that's listed is surrounding a conversation that we did have at our work session as well regarding the requirement for COVID testing for our staff members who are unvaccinated. Again, there was a lengthy discussion regarding that. If there's no other questions on that, I'll make a motion that we discontinue staff testing for unvaccinated individuals at this time. Do I have a second?
Repeat that, please. You're making a motion to discontinue?
Correct. Motion and seconded by Mrs. Bellis, I believe. Yeah. Are there any comments or questions?
Just want to point out that it is a state, federal mandate? State.
The only comment I have is our executive session was a discussion of that issue, and my recommendation is to not discontinue, continue abiding by the mandate for the reasons we discussed that in closed session.
Okay, point taken from Mrs. Caselli. Any other questions? If you call the roll, please, Trish.
Caselli?
No.
I can't put that to him.
Yeah, put no with like 4 zeros after it, or four O's.
Cunningham?
Yes.
Doherty?
No.
Doyle? Fregoso?
No.
Keen?
No.
Ballas? Brand?
Yes.
Motion does not carry.
All right. Moving on. We have our second public comment portion. I make a motion we open to the public. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing no one, I make a motion that we close to the public. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Our next meeting is April 13th, 2022 at 6 p.m.
The board retreat on the 31st. Right?
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm sorry. And the board retreat on the 31st that we discussed at our work session, so hope to see everyone there. With that, I make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions?